Hello and welcome to Watching the Tudors. I'm Heather.
And I'm Jonathan.
And this is the show where we rewatch every episode of the Tudors and talk about what was true, what was dramatic license, and what's just completely made up. So we are now on season 2, episode 8. Oh, and I should say, I have another podcast, the Renaissance English History podcast, that I've had for almost 9 years now. Wow. And I thought it would be fun to go back and rewatch the Tudors and just kind of revisit it all, because you can never revisit the Tudors that much, can you?
I guess not.
And why do you want to do this?
And I'm just doing this to easily learn about some of the history that my wife loves so much. So it's easily palatable in television show form.
So you can learn more about the other aspects of Tudor England that I podcast on. I just reached my 100th episode.
Wow, that's exciting.
I know it is. At englandcast.com. And you can learn more about us at watchingthetudors.com. And so the way we work this is we kind of just jump right into questions. You ask me questions about what happened, and I talk about it. And we'll give our little spoiler alert.
So if you don't know everything there is to know about this, you might learn something that you didn't know.
Yeah. So we assume that you've watched it, and
we assume that you know roughly the story of Henry VIII and how many wives he's had.
Spoiler alert, 6.
Wow.
Did you not know that?
No, I don't know.
Okay, cool.
Not necessarily.
All right, cool. So let's just hop right on in. There was a lot of drama in this episode.
There was a lot happening. I was commenting about how some episodes just seem like, a discussion that's drawn out into a whole episode. And this just seemed like all of these historically poignant, events happening one after the next, after the next. So...
And it was also quite hard to watch at the end because we lost a child.
It was very difficult to watch.
Very hard to watch that.
I have in my notes that watching a miscarriage is difficult.
Yes. Especially when you've had them.
Yes.
So, props to Natalie Dormer for her acting there.
Yeah. And I'm glad our, fate did not rest.
Yeah, I know, right?
It must be tough to go through a miscarriage knowing
that you're probably going to die.
Yeah.
Well, you think about her, we'll see it in the next couple of episodes. You think about her when she was in the tower, like she's going to be arrested in a couple of months. And you just think about how horrible it must have been for her, like having lost these children, and still her hormones are probably completely out of whack and not healed from that. And
your husband's moving on to the new chick.
And you're about to lose your head.
Yep.
Not a good time. Anyway, so let's jump in.
All right. So there was a scene at the beginning where whoever it was, I think Jane Seymour, when she was coming to court, she was just walking through some building in court where there was a bunch of men shoving papers around on tables. And I just wondered, what that could have possibly been. It just seemed like a strange scene.
Court is wherever the king is, right? And with the king travels a retinue of lots of different people, and the business of the court goes with the king. So it's not as if you can email stuff to each other. So you have to have all of your clerks around you for your proclamations and for the things that would come to the king would be the king's justice petitions. If there was land disputes amongst nobles, for example, if there was stuff going on in the countryside with the sheriffs or, things like that, there'd be a lot of justice kinds of things. There'd be a whole system of rewarding people who supported you and the patronage that would go along with being a king. There'd be little admin things like who's arranging the next, the court didn't stay still because you physically could not have that many people with no running water and no toilets and food at the amount that they ate in one place longer than a couple of weeks or a couple months, right? So you're constantly making arrangements for where's the next part of the court going to go? Where are we going to move to next? And just the daily running of the castle and paying people and, making sure that the people who are supposed to have apartments at court got the right apartments and, all that kind of stuff took people to run it, and then you've got relationships with the merchants and the Lord Mayor of London and the clergy and all that kind of it took a lot of people to. So that's basically that scene was our House of Representatives, Senate, Supreme Court.
Well, it's like the administrative offices of every one of those offices all thrown together.
Yeah, so they pushed around a lot of parchment.
Nice. Is it a common practice to bring in the new girl, like to be a part of court?
Yeah, so this wasn't exactly honest because Jane had been at court. So she was at court under Catherine of Aragon. So that...
He didn't discover her and then bring her in.
No. Something happened when he was, in theory, when he was on that trip and he wound up at Wolf Hall, he got close to her. Mm-hmm. But she had been there before, and she was there. Like, she took this playbook of courting him the way she is right out of seeing what Anne Boleyn did, because she was there. Like, she was a lady in waiting with Anne Boleyn. So this isn't, I think normally a king would choose his mistress from the ladies at court because it was convenient. Mm-hmm. And who else is he going to meet? It's not like he's going to
meeting girls all the time at clubs.
Right. Exactly. So, that's that.
And then, Anne, as you mentioned, Anne was already part of court, like when he was falling for her.
Exactly.
And did other kings do? I mean, I guess I was wondering if other kings did this, bringing their mistress in, but I guess Henry didn't do that here, per se.
Right. Yeah, and in general, the mistresses would come from court.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
Yeah.
That's where he would.
That's where he's meeting them. Yeah.
And then did Jane and Anne kind of both know what was going on?
Yeah.
Like they both knew that Jane was the next Anne.
Yeah, and there's a story. Well, I mean, I think had Anne given birth to a son, it would have been very different.
Yeah, it probably would have been. She would have been the official mistress, and Anne would have been the queen, and it would have been sort of
they would have just
traditional
worked it out.
Type.
Yeah, but there is a story of her coming and serving Anne and having a jewel that had like a portrait of the king in it, and Anne ripped it off of her neck and was like, you can't wear that here, and like ripped it, and so it was, it was common, and a lot of times, you have stories of mistresses who stay very prominent for long periods of time. I think it was Edward III. I'd have to fact check this, but I'm pretty sure it was Edward III had a mistress for, like 30 years. And there are other ones like John of Gaunt with Catherine Swynford. She was his mistress and then eventually became his wife after his wife died. And that's where the whole Beaufort Tudor line comes from, through that. But, you look at some of these people where there was a secure wife and the wife knew she was secure and she'd borne sons and done everything that a queen is supposed to do. And then the king had his little, fun, I guess. Mm-hmm. And there are times where, people, the reason I say that is because I'm pretty sure it was Edward III, his mistress, she got really powerful and people were like, kind of coming to her for favors and all this kind of stuff because it was just known that she could hand out favors and she had the king's ear and all that kind of stuff. So, it would become public and people knew and everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then there was another scene with Catherine, talking about Catherine. Was there anything to Catherine potentially being poisoned?
That's something that's come down through the ages because she did have a black heart in the autopsy. Mm-hmm. Supposedly. So it's been something that people have speculated on. In Alison Weir's historical fiction book on Anne Boleyn that came out last year, she actually really, really hinted that George did it. I don't think they did, mm-hmm. But that would have been such a big gamble, especially I can't see them having done that. Yeah. Especially because they were, I don't like the way George is portrayed in this that much because they were quite religious. Mm-hmm. I don't think that poisoning a queen would be something that they would want to do.
Okay.
Yeah. But somebody else might have, for sure. And who knows?
And then also, did Henry, kind of back off the whole monastery thing and, try and become friends with this Spanish king once Catherine was dead?
He did try to become friends with the Spanish king. He kept on the dissolution of the monasteries because they had money and he wanted money.
Okay.
But he did try, that was the whole thing. As soon as she died, the first things he said were, thank God we are now free from all threat of war. And, a lot of people have also said that Anne's downfall was a change in foreign policy, that the king no longer had a reason to dislike the empire. They could be friends now. And she was very pro-French, and the emperor hated her having been there and everything like that. So, yes, he did try to arrange something with the emperor.
Okay. And then, do you know, and maybe this is just a dramatic thing for future episodes, but do you know, like, the significance of when Cromwell met with the king said, "Oh, I heard you have a son and a wife,
Yeah.
You should bring them to court. I'd love to meet them." Do you know what that was about? Or
I think it was just kind of humanizing Cromwell, and also we're going to get in the whole relationship between him and Anne. Here is he's the one plotting her downfall. And I think it's interesting to put this in here that he has a wife and daughters who died and a son. And, he's familiar with loss and he's familiar with love and all of it. He's not just this stone man. Yeah. And yet he can plot like the whole, like Henry, I believe Henry gave the orders, but he said to Cromwell, figure out a way to do this. And Cromwell saw what had happened to Wolsey for not being able to figure it out. And he pretty much had to, and we'll talk about this more, but he pretty much had to get rid of Anne. It was going to be between the two of them. Yeah. And, just showing that he is a human and he's not just this stone person and he can still do this, I think was partially why that was done.
And how did his daughters die? Do we know that?
Yeah, they died of the sweating sickness. And we talked about the sweating sickness in season 1 when Anne Boleyn got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. And I think it took his wife at the same time, too, because he had I'm just trying to remember. I don't know. His wife did die, too. I'm not sure if it was with the daughters or separate.
All right, so then the French king shows up at the Pope's
place.
Yes,
he does.
After apparently doing a pilgrimage.
Yes.
Did he or did kings do pilgrimages?
Yeah, they could do pilgrimages. Henry took a couple of pilgrimages before he dissolved all the monasteries and was done with that.
There was nothing left to go to pilgrimages.
Right. But there's records of him having gone to the Shrine of Walsingham, the Shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham. I think it's in Norfolk. That was a shrine particularly for women and childbirth. And it was supposedly, it's actually a really interesting story. The woman who built it, it was built even before the conquest. So I think it was like 1065, 64, right before the conquest. This woman who was a widow and who owned the land had a dream that God wanted her to build an exact replica of where Jesus was born. So she built and God told her in the dream what to build. And so she built this shrine that was an exact replica of where Jesus was born. Yep. And people would go there and pray for childbirth and safe delivery and fertility issues. Catherine of Aragon went there, lots of things. But the deal was pilgrims would go and walk the last mile or 2 miles, something of it, barefoot. And Henry did that after the birth he had a son, and the son didn't live, but the son died. The son lived for like 7 weeks, and Henry went in between in the period there to give thanks for the birth of his son to Catherine of Aragon. This was in 1511, something like that, way before this show starts. But that I can only imagine, then his son died, and then he wasn't able to have children with Catherine until Mary, and then nothing after that. I can only imagine the kind of feeling of satisfaction that he had signing that dissolution, like, yeah, so much for you.
Taking that one down.
Yeah. So he did go on pilgrimages like that, and that would have been common for kings to do, and especially if you could go to Rome, and the Europeans, it was a little bit easier for them to do that.
Yeah. So that France guy really seemed to be kissing up to the Pope. Yeah,
and see, I think this timing is interesting because Henry wasn't excommunicated until 1538, and that was what they talked about here, that, that Henry was going to become separate from Christendom, and that meant that France could invade. And France did invade later with an armada that's actually larger than the Spanish Armada. And that's the battle where the Mary Rose sank. People might have heard of the Mary Rose ship, and it was in that battle with the French Armada when they invaded. But that wasn't at this point yet. And even before that, the French were pursuing an alliance with the Ottoman Turks, which was much to the distress of all of Christendom, that France was going to like do stuff with the heathen Islam people. And they had a trade agreement in 1536, I think it was, with the Turks. And then all of this stuff with Henry being excommunicated happened after that. I think really France was always trying to play, there was this triangle of England, France, and Spain, the empire. And then the Pope was in the middle there, and everybody was trying to play everybody off, right? And so if you could have France buddying up to the Pope and isolating Spain, that would be good. Or if you could have Spain and France isolating England. And, this was just one of the many little moves that they would do to try to see who could they isolate and what kind of land could they get and stuff like that. So that would have been what he was doing when he invaded. But it all happened later.
Okay. So it did. So it was kind of true, but it was like funny timing how they portray it all. Yeah. So then there was a scene with the Boleyns discussing the Seymour family. Like, would that have been kind of a conversation that would have actually taken place? I mean, people sort of worrying about their place and the positioning and especially for a family like the Boleyn, that they knew how they got there. And so they would like plot and position sort of against. And the Boleyns had a real problem in that they had alienated so many people on their way up. And so, there were a lot of people who were very supportive of Jane as an alternative to Anne. I think they probably would have been worrying about it and seeing what could have come of it. It's just amazing, like the positioning, like just like that everyone wants to get in just right. It's and especially for somebody like the Boleyn family who came up, it's not like Catherine of Aragon, who is a princess. No, for sure. I mean, that's how they got. Like, that's their kind of professional job. Yeah, it somehow reminds me of reality TV personalities these days. Yeah, for sure. It's like, okay, you get your time on screen, and then you got to position yourself to launch your brand. To have a lasting brand. So you want to, be crazy and stick out, but you don't want to like upset people too much. And you don't want to pick any bad enemies. Make friends with the right other kind of reality TV people. Yeah. Then Spain. Did Spain end up asking the Pope for leniency on Henry's behalf, when the two sides were sort of, bargaining, right? I guess, if you will. And of course, we had just seen this excommunication scene, and maybe that's why they put that earlier, because there was some talk in Spain about, we can be friends now, to sort of line everything up, even though it was happened in different years. Yeah, because this was before the threat of excommunication was always hanging over Henry. But it wasn't carried out until later. So, 2 years after this, 2.5 years after this. So there was some talk about, maybe we can all be friends again and you can come back into the fold. And at this point, there was still the idea that if Anne's gone, maybe the whole country will come back to being Catholic. Everyone will just kind of, this whole thing will just blow over. Exactly. Like, this was just a phase he went through. Just a thing. We can all be friends now, right? But the problem is Henry had unleashed. It's really possible if you hadn't had the dissolution of the monasteries and the money coming in, if you hadn't had Cromwell, if you hadn't had... once like things are set in motion. And you can't unset that. You can't say just sorry and like unsmash up all the monasteries. And exactly. So get the hired thugs to give back all the gold. Jeez. Yeah. Yep. And then did Spain actually ask the king to make Mary the rightful heir over Elizabeth? They were trying to do some demands with that. Okay, so that all came from real stuff. And did he ever do that? Like, at any point was Mary the official heir? No. Even after Mary was reunited with him and they became friendly again, she became back in the line of succession. But by that point, he had a son. So she came after the son. Yeah. So by the time, it didn't even matter. Was it really Henry Norris who injured the king, or do we know? Yeah, I don't think we know. And I think they would have put that in there as kind of dramatic license. But none of the original sources that we have talk about who it was. We know that Henry had a really bad accident in 1524, and it was Charles Brandon, I believe, that was part of that one. Uh-huh. And he vowed that he was never going to joust against the king again. Yeah. He felt so horrible.
So I don't think that we know. All of the original sources just talk about that the king had a fall.
We would think
and blah, blah,
if
blah.
they knew, that would be something they would probably include.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, and I'm sure it's in the record somewhere we could find it, but it's not part of
the story.
Right.
Okay. And it seemed like things would have probably gone better for Anne had Henry died. I mean,
well, again, if she had given birth to a son.
Yeah. Yeah.
She had a lot of enemies. Yeah. I think what would have happened is they would have brought Mary back and made Mary.
Yeah. So it wouldn't have necessarily, I mean, she probably wouldn't have lost her head when she did. Right. But it probably wouldn't have been a whole lot better. No. Especially because she's been making enemies, like,
yeah, well, you saw how she treated Mary and everything like that, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because
so
I mean,
if Mary comes back
it's just interesting because for me, being someone who knows nothing about any of this history, like it's like hard for me to imagine what this show is going to be about once Anne is gone, because it kind of seems like the Anne show. Yeah, like, I mean, it all kind of starts with like, oh, Henry's in love with Catherine, and then Anne comes on the scene. It's just sort of like, that's like the first thing that happens. Yeah. And so I guess what I think is interesting for me is sort of getting lost in who these characters are unrelated to Anne. Mm-hmm. And why I say that is, like, with Mary, like, I forget that she's like the queen. I mean, she's like the oldest living heir of the King of England. Like, and because Anne just kind of writes her off and just wants her out of there and just thinks, oh, well, I'm going to get my way. She's going to be nothing. Maybe we can kill her. Maybe we, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's like, no, like, she's like the queen. I mean, and like, they don't know it, but she's the future queen. Yeah. Like, and she's going to be queen over your Elizabeth. And, and it's just, I'm kind of excited to see the Tudors post Anne.
Yeah, it's. I wish they wouldn't have. They just take it up to Henry, so you never see Mary becoming queen. You never see.
Well, except Elizabeth. That we watched that movie with Mary.
Yeah, we watched that Elizabeth movie. Yeah. So
I'm messing things up just slightly by adding to my historical knowledge, other than by the Tudors.
Out of order. For sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that they probably would have tried to have, I don't know, like, this is not being an expert in this, but I'm guessing that they probably would have had Anne stay around really active until they saw whether she gave birth to a son or not. Because if she would have given birth to a son, then that would have been, everybody could rally around a son. Uh-huh. Nobody was going to rally around an infant, or, what she was like, not even 3 yet at this point. Nobody was going to rally against a 2.5-year-old or around a 2.5-year-old Elizabeth at this point, when there was a teenaged Mary mm-hmm. who there was no doubt about her legitimacy at all. Yeah. And, she would have been somebody that could have, and you see it later after her brother Edward died, there was the whole drama where Edward tried to make Lady Jane Grey his heir. Lady Jane Grey was the cousin who was a Protestant. And even England by that point was Protestant, mostly, mm-hmm. but they knew it was Mary's right. Like, they knew, and she was charismatic enough. You don't see this in movies that often. She was charismatic enough. She rallied Mary. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mary, she rallied troops to support her cause. Yeah. And she got these Protestants fighting for her and, joining up and saying, we're going to fight for your right. So I think people probably would have rallied against her, but there probably would have been a waiting period to see what happened with Anne if she gave birth to a son. Yeah. Because that son would have trumped everything then.
Okay. So this accident, Henry,
accident.
This was a big deal, huh?
It was a pretty big deal. Yeah. There's a lot of different reports that you read about, was it as a serious deal? Was it not? And a lot of people get confused there with that 1524 accident as well, which wasn't that big of a deal. This one, he was unconscious. His horse landed on him. And many people, like Susanna Lipscomb, actually wrote a book called 1536, the year that changed Henry, basically, because everything changed for him after this. This mm-hmm. is where we start to see him really become the nutjob tyrant that he become. We haven't seen it that much of it. He's been a king, and he's been acting like a king and acting like somebody who gets his way and is petulant and stuff.
I'm kind of like, I'm a little shocked. Like, this is the
tame one.
The well-behaved
Henry. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it all gets unleashed. I mean, well, he kills, it's the first time a queen has ever been killed. Anne didn't suspect she was going to lose her head. It never happened. Even
this is
you
too
look
much.
In the past, Eleanor of Aquitaine literally rebelled against her husband. Literally gave money to the people who were rebelling against her husband. She got sent to a nunnery. And like, what did Anne do? Anne didn't give birth to a son.
She played hard to get.
Yeah, she's not going to lose her head over that. She could, who could imagine that? So yeah, this is where Henry, and also the ulcer on his leg never heals. He's in pain for the rest. There's talk of maybe blood poisoning and, brain damage and lots of stuff out of this accident. This changed him.
I don't know, man. This guy's too much.
Yeah, you have that written there. This guy is a joke down there.
Yeah, this guy is a joke. Well, we'll get to that. So, did Anne really walk in on the king and his girlfriend Jane Seymour making out?
Well, she was on his lap. Okay. And again, the timing is, I don't think it was in between the jousting accident and her miscarriage, because there was only 5 days in there. And everybody said her miscarriage was because she was upset at the jousting accident. I think it was earlier in January that she walked in on him. Okay. The jousting accident was the 24th. She miscarried on the 29th. I'm pretty sure it was. Mm-hmm. And
so it would have been something for him to have her on his lap.
Yes.
Within 5 days of the jousting accident.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yes, she did walk in on that.
She did walk in and see
and
that.
And Henry appeased her so much. He didn't even, it wasn't like in this, he was like, Jane, I think you should go. And I'm sure he was, pushed her out, but he was like, she means nothing to me. Don't even stress about it. She's
something in
nothing.
My eye, I swear.
Yeah. And he really covered the whole thing up as well as he could. And it did kind of scare Anne. That was when she really started kind of realizing that there could be something to this. Yeah. And that combined with the locket that she wore.
And then, as we said before, it was really hard to watch a miscarriage.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
And I said that Henry really needs to get a hold of his life.
Henry, what does that mean?
I mean, it's just all going to hell, man. I mean, he's falling off his horse. He's dating the new girl. It's just,
yeah.
He's just, and then
there's a meeting he could go to for some help
I know
with that,
he needs some sort of meeting, a 12-step meeting for crazy tyrant kings.
Are you a crazy? I could just see. Hi, I'm Henry. I'm a crazy tyrant king.
Yeah.
Hi, Henry.
Hi, Henry.
So this year I killed my wife. I also killed my best friend from childhood, who was my tutor. I also killed a really important bishop, and I had a really bad jousting accident. I really feel like I'm losing control of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can't quit getting new girlfriends.
My daughter hates me.
I dissolved the national, world religion because I wanted to marry this girl. She said she wasn't going to sleep with me till I married her. So that you remember hearing about the Catholic thing?
Yeah, that was me. That. Yeah, you might have heard about it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Henry. Welcome.
Yes.
Keep coming back. And then, okay, so I guess it's quite dramatic license with the timing, but I just can't believe it. So it's okay, girl sitting on my lap, had a jousting accident, almost die.
Yeah.
My wife has a miscarriage.
Right.
How can I get rid of her?
Right.
Just like that. Boom. Next step. Okay, step 4.
Yeah.
How are we going to play this one?
Well, yeah. And honestly, that was at the end of January, and they didn't, when she miscarried.
Okay.
And they didn't start really planning her downfall until late spring. And part of it was because she had a really bad argument with Cromwell. And Cromwell started to see that his only option, that he had to do the whole nuclear option
kind of thing. He really
saw
it's me or her.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
So sometime in March or April.
Well, no, I'll tell you what. She asked, I think it was April 2nd. She had her almoner or her preacher preach an incendiary sermon to the king about kings that were led astray throughout biblical history by bad advisors.
Yeah, it was aimed not so subtly.
totally
Cromwell.
in him. Totally
and
in
he's
him.
like, if I want to keep my head, like, this chick's got to go.
Yeah, and I think, Henry was like, figure something out for me so I can marry Jane or whatever. And also there was the change in foreign policy and all of that. And I think that that was in the springtime. And like I said, April was when they did that. And then she was arrested in May. So I think, and apparently Cromwell himself said he went back over a 4-day weekend in April, and he had to think about what he could do after. I think it was after that sermon was preached, and he thought, okay, like this, it's on now, and he thought about what he could do, and he came back with a plan. And
they end up getting her on witchcraft stuff.
Well, they did. They got her on adultery and on incest, and said that she had used witchcraft to seduce Henry.
Yeah.
And also, you can also tell, well, we'll talk about this as we get into it too, but how completely they needed to destroy anybody who had been part of it. And it's interesting because there were a couple of people who were arrested, like Thomas Wyatt, who weren't killed. And you see Cromwell's hand in that. And it's interesting to see that they threw in this incest. They couldn't prove incest. What are you going to do? Because a girl's with her brother a lot and they're friends. But they threw this in there to completely smear anything that was left of her. Like Cromwell wanted them gone. Like not just gone, but like gone.
Yeah.
Like no coming back from that.
Mm-hmm. Did George get killed?
Yeah, George got killed too.
It's crazy. It's all crazy.
Yeah, it really is.
All right. Well, all
right.
Those are my questions.
Good times. So we'll be back in another couple of weeks with leading up to the end of season 2 here.
Man. How many seasons?
4.
All right. So we're almost halfway through.
Yeah.
Whew.
Whew.
Lots going on.
Put on your seatbelts. It's a bumpy ride.
Right,
so you can learn more about us at watchingthetudors.com or my other podcast, englandcast.com. And if you like this show, we would really appreciate it if you left a rating on iTunes. It's the #1 way to help more people discover our show. Yay. So thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you again soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.